We are gathered this afternoon under the auspices of a remarkable assertion that the infinite, the utterly transcendent architect of existence, takes note of the minute particulars of your life and mine and responds to them. That is to say, we are pondering the staggering and almost unbelievable efficacy of the human soul's simple, honest reach toward its maker. Now, consider the two elements of our title. First, the magnificent image, God smiled over you at dawn. This is not a metaphor to be casually dismissed. It is a vital piece of theological engineering. When we speak of God smiling, we are, of course, employing a necessary simplification. The sheer, terrifying perfection of the divine cannot be contained in a gesture we understand, but we must use the language we have. The smile, then, is the perfect symbol for uncoerced, pure, and generous approval. It signifies a moment when the will of the Creator and the trajectory of the creature are, however briefly, perfectly aligned. And why at dawn? Because the dawn is the moment of clarity. It is the spiritual interval when the phantoms and confusions of the night, the temptations, the doubts, the despair have receded and the world is revealed in the hard, clean light of truth. It is the moment when you, after enduring the dark, stand ready to receive the light again. It is in this moment of vulnerable, hopeful steadfastness that the divine approval, the smile, is earned, or perhaps better put, best perceived. The second clause, however, is where the genuine lesson lies. Your quiet faith moved heaven. We live in an age that prizes volume. We are trained to believe that if a thing is not loud, public, and aggressive, it must be weak. We see this in the marketplace, in politics, and tragically, sometimes in our understanding of faith. We are tempted to measure piety by the number of sermons delivered, the size of the collection plate, or the fervor of the public declaration. Yet true faith, the faith that has an effect upon the cosmic order, is almost always quiet. It is the persistent, unassuming adherence to principle when no one is watching. It is the silent act of forgiveness that costs the heart dearly. It is the simple daily effort to endure a burden, not for applause, but because one believes, truly believes, that a divine goodness undergirds the universe. This quiet faith is not a faith that is shouted. It is a faith that is lived. It is an internal state of permanent, focused assent. And what happens when this quiet force is properly applied? It moves heaven. Again, we must be precise in our educational definition. To move heaven is not to manipulate God as if by prayer we were pulling a lever on a vast celestial machine. Rather, it is the profound acknowledgement of the spiritual law of reciprocity. When a soul, through the grinding work of quiet obedience and genuine trust, aligns its own will with the eternal divine will, it creates a conduit. Heaven is not a distant, passive entity. It is an active, living reality. And when your humble, quiet, and persistent faith removes the spiritual obstructions you have placed in the way, the pride, the doubt, the distraction, the eternal power flows through that conduit. Your quiet faith doesn't force heaven to act. It simply allows heaven to respond in the manner it eternally desired. It allows the smile perceived at dawn to become the salvation received at noon. The great educational takeaway then is this: efficacy in the spiritual life is not about making a loud noise on earth. It is about cultivating a deep silence in the heart. It is the silent surrender, the simple trust that possesses the power to bridge the gap between the temporal and the eternal. It is your quiet faith, not your loud performance, that God notices. And it is that faith which, like a gentle but irresistible tide, alters the very course of your world. The dawn as epiphany asserts that the dawn is not merely a meteorological event, the daily turning of the earth, but a moment of profound spiritual and intellectual illumination. It is the critical instant when truth, or in our case, divine favor, cuts through the metaphorical darkness that precedes it, allowing the soul to see clearly. The dawn, therefore, is the perfect stage for the recognition of God's smile. To understand this, we must first examine the nature of the night it displaces. The spiritual night is not a time of simple slumber. It is the time of unclarity, confusion, and spiritual siege. It is the long vigil spent wrestling with doubt, succumbing to the inertia of despair, or enduring a prolonged trial of suffering. In the night, the soul is easily deceived by shadows. Temptations appear more vivid and powerful. Hope seems like a ridiculous fancy, and the very goodness of God appears hidden or suspect. Our vision is limited to the small circle of our own anxiety, and the overarching architecture of grace and cosmic justice is obscured. The transition from this night to the day is not gradual in its effect on perception. It is in its spiritual meaning an epiphany, a sudden manifestation. When the light first breaks the horizon, it does more than just illuminate the landscape. It fundamentally alters the quality of our sight. It banishes the ambiguities of the dark. The monsters under the bed resolve into familiar furniture. The loud whispers of anxiety are exposed as mere echo. This is the state in which God's smile is most perceptible and most meaningful. The smile itself, the moment of divine recognition and approval, is an eternal truth. God's goodness and love do not wax and wane with our moods or our circumstances. The reason we speak of perceiving it at dawn is due entirely to our own readiness. The soul that has fought through the darkness and simply endured, not with a triumphant shout, but with quiet, stubborn persistence, is the soul that has scraped off the inner crust of self-pity and worldly distraction. It has achieved a state of humble clarity. The act of standing ready at the break of day, having survived the night's spiritual assault, is in itself an act of quiet faith. It is the human spirit, tired but unbowed, stating, "I am still here. I still believe that light will come." In this state of renewed vulnerability and simple belief, the soul's receiving apparatus is finely tuned correctly. God's smile, which was always present, is now seen for what it is, a definitive affirmation that the struggle was worthwhile. The enduring was noted, and the quiet adherence to hope was justified. The dawn is thus the temporal manifestation of an eternal truth, an appointment kept between the steadfast heart and the unchanging divine love. It teaches us that to perceive the highest blessings, we must first pass through the lowest valleys and wait, eyes open, for the clarifying light. Divine anthropomorphism centers on the phrase, "God smiled," arguing that this is a deliberate and necessary theological tool. It simplifies the abstract, infinite concept of divine grace, approval, or pleasure into a relatable human gesture. This simplification is not a flaw. It is a profound act of divine condescension, designed to facilitate the human apprehension of the intimacy of God's relationship with the individual soul. To speak of a theological concept like divine approval is to traffic in abstractions, the sheer unconditioned perfection of the Creator. An entity outside of time, space, and biological limits cannot truly smile as a person does. The movement of facial muscles or the expression of transitory emotion is entirely alien to the immutable, transcendent ground of being. If we were to insist on a strictly philosophical definition, we might be left with cold, impenetrable language. The uncreated spirit manifested a favorable disposition congruent with the temporal faithfulness of the finite soul. Such language, while accurate, utterly fails to nourish the spirit or console the anxious heart. This is precisely where anthropomorphism becomes an indispensable educational and spiritual tool. By saying God smiled, the infinite is brought into the realm of the familiar. It is a linguistic bridge thrown across the vast chasm between the creator and the creature. The smile, as a human gesture, carries with it an immediate and universally understood meaning. Unconditional approval, delight in personal recognition. It is the acknowledgement that says, "I see you, and I am pleased with you." The use of this image assures the struggling believer of two vital things: personhood over principle. The smile assures us that God's approval is not merely the logical result of following an impersonal moral equation. It is a personal and relational response. We are not cogs fitting into a universal machine. We are children receiving the delighted gaze of a father. This transforms obedience from a cold duty into a loving response. Intimacy over distance. The smile suggests proximity. One does not smile at an abstraction. One smiles at a person standing near enough to return the gaze. This image shatters the notion of a distant, indifferent deity who set the clockwork universe running and then retired. Instead, it places the divine within the immediate vicinity of the soul, concerned with its specific daily progress. The lesson here is profound. God speaks to us not only in thunder and law, but in the most accessible and intimate terms available, the language of the human heart. The smile is God's own concession to our finite nature. a divine translation of approval that allows us to grasp the magnitude of his favor without being annihilated by the sheer perfection of its source. It educates us to seek a relationship defined by affection and affirmation, not just obligation and fear. When we contemplate God smiled, we are engaging with a divinely sanctioned simplification designed to deepen our understanding of divine love and accessibility. This human image, therefore, is the very bedrock of our hope, assuring us that the transcendent God not only governs the cosmos, but also cares for the particular soul standing ready at the break of dawn. The third keynote focuses on the power of quietude, analyzing the phrase quiet faith. This concept champions the idea that genuine, effective belief operates primarily in the hidden inner places of the heart and is measured by its substance, consistency, and endurance, not by the volume or spectacle of its public display. It educates us on the crucial distinction between performing faith and possessing it. In the spiritual economy, noise is often a sign of weakness. The loud declaration, the dramatic public gesture, or the fervent, ostentatious prayer often betrays a need for external validation. Such acts are directed not solely toward heaven, but also toward the earthly audience, seeking the transient rewards of human approval or self-aggrandizement. This kind of faith, while sometimes sincere, risks being contaminated by the very vanity it ought to be resisting. It is faith that seeks applause, and applause is a notoriously poor substitute for grace. Quiet faith, conversely, is a faith that has achieved maturity and confidence. It has no need for props or witnesses because its primary relationship is with the divine, who sees in secret. This is not a passive or weak faith. It is, in fact, the most strenuous form of belief. Invisible obedience. It is the commitment to perform the difficult, correct action when there is no possibility of human reward. It is the honesty in the unsupervised transaction, the charity given without seeking recognition, the restraint exercised when one has the power to inflict harm. These are the true ethical crucible moments, and they are conducted entirely in the silence of the soul. It's inner consistency. Quiet faith is measured by resilience. It is the daily grinding effort to maintain hope and principle in the face of protracted failure, emotional exhaustion, or simple boredom. This faith doesn't flare up during a crisis only to vanish afterwards. It is the steady internal light that remains burning throughout the monotonous stretches of life. This persistence, this refusal to surrender the small inner territory of belief constitutes its immense spiritual power. Focus on substance. Loud faith often focuses on the form, the ritual, the phraseology, the outward sign. Quiet faith is focused entirely on the substance, the actual transformation of the will and the alignment of the inner life with the recognized good. It is concerned not with appearing devout, but with becoming genuinely good. The essential paradox is this: the quieter the faith, the deeper its roots are set. A shallowly rooted tree needs loud support and dramatic bracing. A tree with deep, unseen roots can withstand the greatest storm in silence. The power that moves heaven must be a force that transcends the temporal realm, and this force is generated not by earthly sound waves, but by the quiet, concentrated effort of the will aligned with truth. Quiet faith is the educational antidote to spiritual vanity. It teaches us that spiritual efficacy is found where the world least expects it, in humility, silence, and persistent, unsung loyalty. This is the internal workshop where the soul is prepared for the morning's light and where the profound, quiet movements that affect the cosmos are actually generated. Action and reaction in the cosmos addresses the magnificent claim, "Your quiet faith moved heaven." This concept establishes a profound cosmic reciprocity, suggesting that an earnest, humble act of human faith has the direct and effective power to solicit a definitive response from the eternal transcendent realm. This is not merely poetry. It is a vital lesson in the active, dynamic relationship between the temporal human will and the infinite divine will. To move heaven is to speak of influencing the highest reality, the realm of pure being, immutable law, and divine purpose. A common error in understanding this dynamic is to view heaven as an impersonal, mechanical system that can be forced or manipulated by human petition. This interpretation would reduce prayer and faith to a kind of spiritual sorcery where if we utter the right incantation or generate enough fervent emotion, God is compelled to act according to our specifications. This idea is theologically unsustainable and spiritually bankrupt, as it places the creature's will above the Creator's wisdom. The true educational meaning of moving heaven lies in understanding heaven's perpetual willingness to move. God's love and redemptive purpose are not static. They are an active, outgoing force, constantly seeking alignment with human souls. Heaven's motion, therefore, is not initiated by our quiet faith. It is unlocked and permitted by it. Our quiet faith serves two crucial functions in this process of cosmic reciprocity: the removal of obstruction. The greatest impediment to the divine will acting in our lives is not God's reluctance, but our own internal resistance. This resistance manifests as pride, which insists on its own way, doubt, which paralyzes action, and self-absorption, which deafens us to guidance. Quiet faith, being rooted in humility and trust, is the persistent work of removing these obstructions. When the soul in quiet sincerity says, "Thy will be done," it effectively clears the channel. It is the human side of the bridge being completed. The act of alignment. Faith is ultimately the alignment of the finite human will with the infinite divine will. It is not just believing in God, but believing God, trusting his purpose even when it is obscure. When a soul achieves this alignment through persistent, quiet obedience, it does not create a new divine action, but rather plugs itself into the existing eternal flow of grace, power, and wisdom. Therefore, when the text states that quiet faith moved heaven, it is asserting that the individual's steadfast acceptance and readiness triggered the release of a benevolent action that was always ready and waiting. Your faith didn't change God's mind, it changed your status relative to God's purpose. It moved you from a position of resistance to a position of reception. This reciprocity teaches us a profound truth about human dignity. Our spiritual lives are not negligible. Our inner decisions, our quiet endurance, our humble trust are the hinge upon which cosmic power is able to turn and enter the world. The greatest events in the spiritual cosmos are often the direct result of the smallest, most honest actions performed in the silence of the heart. The educational paradox focuses on the overall lesson embedded in the title, the idea that the greatest spiritual effects moving heaven are achieved by the quietest causes, a simple, steady faith. This teaches us a fundamental principle of the spiritual life, that efficacy is often inversely proportional to earthly noise and display. It is a corrective education against the world's values, which perpetually confuse magnitude with substance. The world operates on the principle of direct proportionality. If you want a big result, you must apply a big force. To move a mountain, you need dynamite. To get attention, you need a megaphone. This logic is deeply ingrained in us, and we instinctively carry it over into our spiritual reckoning. We are tempted to believe that a deep sorrow requires a colossal public outpouring of grief, or that a significant divine blessing must be met with a spectacular, highly visible act of piety. The spiritual economy operates under a different paradoxical law. Here the logic is inverted. The most profound spiritual forces are often those that are least visible and most internal. The quiet cause, quiet faith. As we have established, quiet faith is the humble, steady alignment of the will. It is the unadvertised daily choice to trust, to forgive, and to endure. This cause is small, not in importance, but in scale. It is localized within the single human heart, conducted without fanfare, and often perceived by no one save God. It requires a profound act of self-effacement where the ego's desire for recognition is silenced. The grand effect moved heaven. The effect of this quiet action is colossal, the turning of the eternal order toward the individual's needs. This is not a small localized benefit. It is the coordination of cosmic power and grace. The educational lesson here is that spiritual power resides in concentration, not dispersion. The faith that is scattered in loud public performance spends its energy seeking human approval and dissipating its internal force. The quiet faith, however, is a concentrated, focused beam of will directed entirely at the transcendent. Like the small lens that focuses weak sunlight into a scorching point, the silent heart concentrates its belief into a force potent enough to pierce the veil between time and eternity. This inverse proportionality serves a clear theological purpose. It ensures that true spiritual success can never be mistaken for worldly triumph. It prevents spiritual pride, the most insidious and corrosive of vices, from taking root. If God's greatest rewards were consistently tied to the loudest, most spectacular efforts, then piety would simply become another arena for ambitious, self-promoting display, rewarding the skilled actor over the sincere believer. By tying the moving of heaven to the quietness of the heart, the paradox educates us on the true scale of value. It teaches us to search for power, not in the marketplace or on the stage, but in the inner sanctuary of our own unobserved decisions. The ultimate spiritual lesson is that God measures our deeds not by their impact on public opinion, but by their sincerity in private counsel. The greatest force on earth is the simple, humble heart that persists in its faith without demanding a drum roll. We have traveled today from the break of day to the heart of the cosmos, from the simple human gesture of steadfastness to the overwhelming reality of divine approval. Our exploration of God smiled over you at dawn, your quiet faith moved heaven, has brought us to a singular, profoundly educational truth that the spiritual life is not won in the clamor of the marketplace, but in the silence of the soul. The world, with its loud demands for evidence and spectacle, will continue to tell you that what matters is volume, visibility, and measurable impact. It will tempt you to trade the substance of quiet faith for the ephemeral rewards of public performance. But let us hold fast to the paradox we have uncovered. The immense, terrifying love of God is not earned by great dramatic feats, but is perceived in the humility of simply making it through the night and standing ready for the light. The smile of God is a personal affirmation, witnessed at the dawn of clarity, because you remove the obstructions of your own doubt and pride. And that most powerful of cosmic motions, the moving of heaven, is achieved not by coercion, but by alignment. Your quiet, unyielding commitment to trust simply allows the eternal benevolent purpose to flow unimpeded into your temporal life. Therefore, do not despair of the smallness of your struggles or the quietness of your prayers. Recognize that every honest, hidden choice to do right, every silent act of forgiveness, every humble persistence in belief is the concentrated, irresistible force that matters most to heaven. Go from this place knowing that the grandest effects often proceed from the quietest causes. Go and cultivate the deep, unseen roots of a quiet faith, for it is precisely this simple, humble force that possesses the power to change your world and solicit the approval of the eternal.